I don't know what it is, but the dining halls on hard mode just don't seem that much harder. At least not on the same level that the previous areas were. Maybe it's the transition from closed narrow hallways to larger open rooms. Things like the blue spikes and chaser drones are at their most lethal in a closed space. Well, that was a little weird. There is supposed to be a laser on the far right hand side, but for some reason the left laser destroyed it before the platform appeared between them. This actually makes things much easier for me. Didn't stop me from failing the basic jump though. With the laser there, the jump does require a little bit of timing, but it's still quite simple, and I die on it. Of course I do. Amazing. Okay, third time's the charm. Can't get stuck here, this is only the second room. There we go. Wow, sure, let's just jump straight into the rocket. This room seems very simple for hard mode. I guess I also don't think they really went as crazy as they clearly could have, given what the previous levels contained. It's like hard mode has a very high skill gate for entry, then levels out to being just fairly difficult. Then again, maybe it's just my own skill at the game that's desensitized me to the more challenging stuff it throws at you. I think that switch is a little faster on hard mode. And that was completely intentional. Another relatively basic room, though without the white blocks it would have been much more interesting. Hey, remember this room? I know what you're probably wondering, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Right now, doesn't it seem odd how much empty space there is here? It really feels like there should have been more things to dodge besides the occasional homing rocket. Okay, so the room is really simple and I could have gone to the end without any trouble, but since I couldn't possibly leave well enough alone, I went to check on something. And as it turns out, the souvenir is exactly the same as normal mode. All of them are, in fact. They're all just as hard to get to, no matter what the difficulty, and thank God for that. For some reason, I decided to go for it because of this, which was a phenomenally stupid idea on my part that I was correctly punished for by falling on spikes and then being incapable of getting past that one rolling robot for several minutes. There we are. Now was that so hard? Apparently yes. absolute dick move. I don't think there's a single thing in the rest of the game that's that obnoxious. And just for that, I'm floating over the entire room. I like this room, though it might have been because of how many times I narrowly avoided getting hurt. There's the rocket as I activate the switch, the bomb destroying the chaser drone, landing right next to the rolling robot, and while I do take one hit, I think my jump over the second rolling robot is impressive enough to make up for it. Clearing a difficult section of a platformer on your first try is always incredibly satisfying. I highly recommend it. Alright, this and the next room are probably the hardest in the dining halls, mainly because there are no checkpoints in them. Die and you have to restart the entire room. There's a lot of homing rockets in this one, but thankfully the moving white blocks also block rockets, so they can act as moving shields. And then, when that didn't work out, I went for the low path. I was successful after a few tries, but it did get a little bit stressful towards the end, so for the first and only time in the main game, I hit the panic button. And that's what the music box does. Oh, off to a fantastic start here. I'm not a huge fan of the blue spikes being used to turn a fairly open area into a corridor. I think they're best used in already close quarters. Same goes for the chaser drones. I'm also not a huge fan of them being placed in a room that's so big the camera scrolls in it. It can result in a lot of out-of-nowhere deaths, like that one. Good God, you'd think I'd have figured out how to best get past blue spikes by this point. This bit right here really annoyed me. Not as much because it meant I had to start the whole room over, but because of how obvious it was and how it was my fault for jumping straight into it. Hey, speaking of spikes and chaser drones in closed spaces, the two don't mix especially well, of course. Enemies killing each other is something that happens quite a bit in hard mode. Ironically, the rooms that have more and more stuff packed into them can wind up being the easiest ones because of this. Alright, this has happened a few times in the dining hall so far, and I want to address it in this room. In a way, using the beam to float over most of the room kinda feels like cheating to me. Yes, I still did it, shut up. I call it the crayon physics effect, where you can be given a puzzle that someone likely spent quite a bit of time and energy designing, and just wind up brute forcing it using your most basic tools. Of course, in PID, it's clear that the designers knew that it could be done considering some of the souvenir and secret constellation placements, so it begs the question of whether they just considered flying over the room another way of solving it, or if they didn't playtest hard mode well enough. The first time I went through this room, I spent way too long on those rolling robots. What was that, a minute of trying to drop them on the spikes? You can just jump over them. Remember that room not 5 minutes ago where there were a bunch of blue spikes arranged in pairs like that? Evidently I don't. And would you look at that, we're at the end of the dining halls. For some reason, the fight with Orlando is exactly the same as normal mode. Same number of funnels, same number of hits to each funnel. Not sure why, since the rest of the bosses are harder, or at least longer, in some way. Since it is though, and since I didn't die on it, that's it for this one. Altogether, including the boss fight, I spent about 24 minutes in the dining halls, which is only a couple of minutes more than my run in normal mode, although that included a significant amount of time where I failed to get the souvenir as well. In any case, that's it. Not so bad, honestly.